Hello, welcome everybody. Welcome to How to Prevent an Organisational Funding Crisis. It's been a tough year for NGOs and the communities that they support. Good financial management and funding underpin an effective organisation and enable NGOs to continue the great work that you've been doing and support the communities that you work with. As I said before, we're going to hear from two organisations who looked at their funding and financial models and proactively made changes to ensure sustainability of their organisations. Our first speaker, who we're going to hear from, is Yasmina Haynes. Yasmina is the CEO of Integrity Action and has been since 2016. She passionately shares the belief that citizens who act with and demand integrity are at the heart of the solution for supporting sustainable development. She's previously worked on child protection, refugees and IDPs, poverty reduction, disability and social welfare at the Danish Refugee Council, Oxford Policy Management, Rally International, Save the Children, UNDP and UNICEF. After that, we're going to be hearing from Rowena Warren. Rowena is the Director of Finance and Resources at Sendacao. She started in 2015 when she started working in their program in Kenya. Rowena is a chartered accountant and has spent her whole career in financial management in the not-for-profit sector. So, first of all, we're going to hear from Yasmina, who's going to tell us a little bit more about what they've been doing at Integrity Action to kind of make their organisation more sustainable and able to kind of deal with financial crises, hopefully, as and when they come. Over to you, Yasmina.
Thanks, Zoe. And probably better used than word that's more appropriate than preventing would be saying what we did to kind of ease off a bit of the pressure. I think, as Tricia was saying, we're all in the same storm, but in different boats, and hopefully some of our experience will help you through the issues that you might have. So till about 2020, I would say Integrity Action was your typical small UK-based charity. We operated in about 9 countries with a core team managing about 10 partners. With partners, we were implementing programs funded by 2 key and a handful of other funders. Our eyes were set on growth, both in terms of impact, geographical presence and funding. And once the crisis hit, we knew the plan had to change, and it had to change very, very fast. Like most of charities, we started looking at income and thinking about how to speed up securing reliable, preferably unrestricted funding from even more diversified funders base. While we were very lucky that our traditional funders have stayed loyal to us, we knew that our pipeline, including bids that were in the final stages of bidding, were under threat. So the cunning plan was, and I think this will sound quite familiar to quite a few of you, was to focus on producing a list of strong funding prospects, building unmatched understanding of how to appeal to them, and then sending bids as fast as we could. As I was preparing for this session and looking back, I was thinking where we were back then was thinking that we needed an incremental improvement in our fundraising process. And where we've landed now is with fundamentally different business planning process. Because the more we worked on fundraising, it became clearer that we needed to set a process to allow programmatic vision and ambition to drive all other target setting across the organization. So now we have about 5-step business planning process. Any of those steps can be repeated multiple times till you find a balance between key elements. And it is these steps that I wanted to share with you and an overview of how we're doing it at Integrity Action. So step number 1 is setting programmatic ambition. It should be a very straightforward document that anyone inside or outside the organization is able to read and understand exactly what we are planning to do next year. It should answer questions like, what are the priorities, what are the key programmatic commitments that we have already made, do they require additional funding or finance, do we wish to scale them up horizontally or vertically, and what are the new programs that we wish to tackle. Then in step number 2, based on that plan, looking at the ambition, we calculate resources and investments that we need to make the plan happen. As part of it, we try to answer questions like, what are the operational costs of already committed programs? What are the operational costs of new projects? Do we need new staff? Do we need additional resources? And what are the implications on reserves policy? Step number 3, and only once we have the vision and we have costed what we are required to have it delivered, is that we begin to look into fundraising and thinking about, okay, if this is the money that we require, where can we get it from, and how do we get there? And an important thing is our fundraising plan. Within our fundraising plan, we only allow 10% up or down from the projected cost of business plan. And an important thing here, and this was a fundamental difference for us, because previously we would have something like, I don't know, 20% difference, because we would think about, well, maybe all the things from our pipeline are going to work out. So that's an important learning. Once fundraising plan is completed, then we begin to build a budget, and that's our step 4. We look into things like, if expenditure and income are balanced, are there cost efficiencies to be found? If not, how can we find them? Looking at the investments needed to be made in balance sheets so that we have money needed to manage the risk or unpredictability in the strategy, and etc. Final step 5 is to go over 4 steps over and over again to complete the plan, have it approved, and then communicate internally to the board and staff and everybody involved, and also externally. Now, the key thing that we have learned is that setting the programmatic ambition is incredibly difficult. Where the key worry that we faced in that is that we couldn't resist this feeling that we were placing all eggs in one basket and that we might be missing other viable opportunities, and turning down opportunities to bid goes against rational thinking, especially in the current environment. But then on the flip side, what we have noticed is that we were able to build better quality offers that the entire team could be behind. Suddenly we're not pursuing heaven knows how many bidding offers, but instead focusing on what exactly we want to do, and then thinking about who funders out there might be able to fund it. And therefore we were adjusting our core work and being able to reuse all the investment made in those bids. I think importantly, what we have learned is that this approach has made us less dependent on a handful of funders. In that ability to timely adjust projects and programs that we have already designed to suit other funders, meant that we could save quite a lot of money and resources, and that we could be more focused in our pursuits. Now, finally, Bond has asked me to reflect on how the process has impacted Integrity Action's funding and financial resilience. I have no wisdom to offer on that front. I think time will tell. We keep receiving one bombshell after another bombshell, both in shape of FCBO news and then how funders are responding in the States and etc. But one thing that I can reflect on is that this new process has made our thinking clearer. It has made us more focused. It means that our bids are better and that we're churning them faster. And hopefully, these are good indications that signed contracts that will be honoured by funders are not too far away. Thank you, Zoe. Zoe, you're on mute.
Thank you. Sorry, first one of the day down. Thank you so much. Really interesting to hear about how you've adapted your business processes. And I think there'll be lots of questions coming in. And I just remind people, if you've got any questions, please drop them into the chat box and we'll get to them after Rowena's spoken. So Rowena, I'm just going to share my screen. If you bear with me one moment, because you've got a PowerPoint, and then it is, let's go. And then it is over to you.
Thanks, Zoe. I think it's just coming up. Great. Okay. Morning, everybody. Thanks so much for joining this session. I'm going to talk about something that I'm really passionate about, and I think it's actually such a crucial element towards making the sector more sustainable and actually more resilient to fluctuations in income. I'll start just by talking briefly about Centrecal, set the context. Before you think we're bonkers, we don't send cows. We haven't for many years now, and that is how we started. But now we work in 6 different African countries. We work with rural communities and we help them to use their land to build futures for themselves with hope and confidence. So our approach is very much Africa designed and developed. We work with families for the long term. So we've been operating for over 30 years now, and we've seen a lot of change in the sector during that time. And we do recognise that we need to keep adapting and embracing new ideas so that we continue to be relevant and sustainable. So next slide, please, Zoe. So what have we been doing? So we've been trying to work on increasing our financial resilience. So it says on the slide, we've been focusing on growing our unrestricted income. We've also reviewed our fundraising operations to try and become more efficient. We've minimised our costs, particularly in the UK. We've really reduced our overheads in the UK, and we're trying to move much more of our resources, particularly kind of programme support, to Africa. And 3 years ago, we merged with another international development charity called Emerge Poverty Free. Next slide. So why did we merge? Well, we were approached actually by EPF. They recognised that their model was no longer sustainable. Their income was reducing actually quite quickly, and their UK costs were increasing. So it just meant that less of their funding was going on their programmes internationally. Also, their ability to monitor those programmes, because they were working through partners, was really challenging for them. In Centrecal, so we wanted to grow our income and our supporter base, obviously, and ultimately we wanted to work with more people. Both organisations wanted to be more effective by kind of sharing their sort of knowledge and ways of working. So EPF worked exclusively through partners. And at the time, Centrecal didn't really have very much experience of partnership working. So we wanted to learn more about that and share ideas. Next slide. So what worked well? I think overall the merger was a great success. Our income has increased. We've been able to start some really interesting projects in kind of new areas of work for us. We've increased our knowledge, as I said, by kind of working together on projects. I think the most important thing actually is that we have significantly reduced EPF's overheads and fundraising costs, which ultimately has meant that we've been able to help more people in our programmes in Africa. Next slide, please. So lessons learned. So it's been about 3 years since we completed the merger. So we've learned a lot, and we're quite far down the process now. There's a couple of really important lessons that we've learned. The first one is it's really important that the values and the culture of the organisations involved are aligned. The merger's got to help in achieving the missions of both organisations. but that's important. And I really can't emphasise enough the importance of both organisations being in a healthy financial position with sufficient reserves. So important to plan ahead and have the foresight to begin the discussions at the right time. I'm also a trustee of an international development charity working in Tanzania, and we actually closed at the end of last month. And we talked about mergers, we had those discussions, but it was too late. So it's really important to start the discussions when you're in a healthy financial position. Also important to point out that the work doesn't stop when the merger agreement is signed. Really important to have a strong comms and implementation plan, because it is a lot of work. Next slide. So the financial benefits, as I've said, the main benefit was actually significantly reduced costs. As the slide states, prior to the merger, EPF's cost of fundraising was really high. It was about 50%. So very early on in the process, we merged all of our back office functions, and we gradually transitioned fundraising activities to the existing Centrecal team. So there were very, very few costs then associated with operating EPF. Which means now nearly all of EPF's income goes directly to projects in Africa. Final slide, I think. So our tips, having gone through this process, it's a lot of work. If you're thinking about it, don't underestimate how much work it is. We actually tried to do most of it ourselves, and that was a big mistake. There are some brilliant resources out there. We've been working with Advocates for International Development, which I know some of you will be familiar with. I really rate them as an organisation. They will help you, and they're great. They put us in touch with some really good legal professionals that helped us. We also used an external consultant for some of the project management work. The other thing that we learned is that people can be very wary of change. So a clear and an honest communication plan really helps with any potential reluctance. I think in conclusion, I would say definitely do it. For us, it's built our financial resilience, it's increased our income, it's reduced our costs, it's increased our knowledge, and ultimately it's benefited the communities that we work with. Thanks, Zoe.
Thank you. Great. So thanks both Yasmina and Rowena. Everyone, please continue to drop questions into the chat box. I've got a few, and Yasmina, I was thinking while you were speaking, I was wondering, all the changes that you've been making, there's a question come through. I'll do this one first. So someone said, for you, Yasmina, can you tell us more about the process of implementing this change in your business processes? Who was it led by, and did you meet any resistance internally to the changes? That was what I was going to ask as well. Yasmina, over to you.
Yeah, I think change in such process needs to be led by CEO, and CEO, to make it happen, has to have a good support by the S&T first and foremost, and communicate it very clearly with the board. I think for us, what was a good turning point was that as we designed these steps, we allocated responsibility of each S&T member to every single one of them. So it's very clear who needs to do what and at what point. And I was really there to just oversee the process, basically do the easiest job, because I have an amazing colleagues. What was very interesting is, as we begin to have conversations with the board and the team, there was a lot of support for it. To my surprise, loads of people said, "Oh, we thought that this is how these processes happen anyway." Well, in theory they do, in practice they don't. There's a little bit of a wet finger in the air when it comes to business planning processes that none of us want to admit. So we didn't have much resistance within the team at all, and by the team I mean the board. It was a natural right thing to do. I think some people needed a different level of reassurance. They wanted to see different documents written down, or to see more clearly the process. But I personally don't call that resistance. That's a natural, healthy curiosity.
Great. There's also another question here from someone saying, are there any documents you could share to reflect this process? And Yasmina, if you can, maybe we can drop that into the chat box. But also, someone wants to know what the size of your budget is, so the size of your organisation, I guess, to have a sense of for their own organisation.
Sure. We're a small organisation by Bond's definition. We fit under 2 million turnover. So last year our income dropped and we closed the year at 1.3 million. I don't have any documents and templates as such to share with this audience. But if you are interested to know more, please email me, and I'll happily talk it through or share what we do have.
Okay, great. There's another question in here for you. One of the things we find challenging is the link between the programme team and our development team. Do you have any advice on how to divide the work between these two teams in terms of how to build new relationships, create value propositions, and curate stakeholder relationships?
I think the way I think about those two teams are programs team. They're the dreamers. They're the people who are in pursuit of impact. They're the ones who will be listening to people that we serve. They're the ones who will be coming up with exciting projects and etc. But also, in our case, they're the team who's in charge of evidencing and learning and all the rest. So they need to be understood as such. As development team is more like a salesy team that looks at this amazing offer and goes like, oh, you're absolutely out of your mind. None of this is sellable. Or, we don't have funders or can't reach funders who might be interested. I think what's the way that we have found the balance is that we fully respect that creativity and ambition of our programs team, but at the same time, we fully respect the hard job that fundraising team needs to do to be able to secure the funding. And just like in any team's work, it's incredibly important to continue that conversation. And to a large degree, this new process of business planning has provided us with that balance. When the programs team kicks off with this ambition, but then pencils it down in such an easily understood way, and once the program teams can understand how much money we would actually need to raise to make that ambition happen, that's where you begin to open the process of finding the balance and etc. Yeah, I would. That's my advice when it comes to it.
Great, really interesting to hear about how you've got, how you're trying to bring together your two teams to kind of make the best and work well together. We've got a question for you now, Rowena. Someone is asking, what was it about EPF's business model that wasn't working, that was in Send a Cow?
Yeah, I think that's a really good question. Sort of alluded to it in the presentation, that mainly I think it was the costs. So the costs were increasing and the income just wasn't increasing at the same level. A lot of that income was institutional. So I think everybody listening in knows that you have to, in order to secure that income, you have to be able to have the financial rigor. And so they were needing sort of people to support them with financial management and also the reporting. So their costs were very high for the level of income that they were able to raise. They kind of changed their sort of their approach to from kind of disaster relief to more poverty alleviation. And I think they really struggled in terms of then repositioning themselves, particularly to some of their kind of loyal donors. They had an ageing supporter base as well that was making it incredibly challenging. So really it was very high cost. They had a central London office, and they were at that level of income that becomes sometimes quite challenging. So Centrecal was larger. We're about 7 million turnover a year. They were about 1 million. So we had the kind of resources to be able to take on that additional stewardship of donors without increasing the costs.
Great, thanks, Rowena. I was wondering, because we hear quite a lot in the sector that, you know, there are a lot of organisations, and really there's lots of people that are trying to encourage organisations to merge. I worked for an organisation that should have merged, it didn't, and ended up closing. So I wonder if there's anything that you think we could do to encourage organisations to kind of be forward thinking and think about merging.
Yeah, and as I said in my sort of brief presentation, I'm a trustee for an organisation where that exact thing has happened as well. So again, similar level of income to EPF, and it just wasn't enough to sustain the business model. I personally feel like quite a lot of that reluctance to pursue kind of mergers, acquisitions, comes from probably trustees rather than CEOs and senior leadership team. I think generally the CEOs, senior leadership teams are quite progressive in their thinking, but I think sometimes that reluctance comes from the trustees, which is completely understandable. Many maybe founded the organisations and feel very passionately about retaining the identity. But I think if you're kind of thinking that a merger might be the right route to go down for your organisation, as I said at the beginning, it all comes down to culture and having that aligned culture, values and mission. And then you can continue, you can obviously continue your work.
Great, I think Yasmina, you have something to jump in there. Do you want to jump in?
Sure. Rowena, I was reading an article by CEO of Restless Development, Perry, was it last week, when he said that one of the key reasons why he thinks mergers and acquisitions are not happening are egos. And not egos by CEOs or trustees, but because we all so passionately believe in what our organisation does that we just can't see how it's going to fit under any other roof but our own. So I have a question about how has Centrecal managed to reflect EPF's mission and what EPF's unique added value is, or is it reflected at all in now broader Centrecal family?
Yeah, it's an excellent question, and there was resistance on both sides. Centrecal has a direct delivery approach. EPF delivers through partners, and on both programs, sort of management on both sides actually found that quite difficult to see that a different approach could bring value to their organisations. So yeah, that was challenging, definitely. And I think we're doing a project actually in northern Uganda working with refugees, which was funded through EPF funding. It's the type of project we haven't done before. It's a really exciting project. So we were able to, I think, really reflect what EPF supporters felt very passionately about. So yes, I think that over time, probably it becomes a bit more diluted, if I'm honest. But yeah, we certainly have tried to start new projects with EPF funding that would resonate with their supporters and their mission.
Thank you, Rowena and Yasmina, for that. A question here, Yasmina, for you. Someone's asking, as the resource mobilisation team are human, how do you maintain their mental health within the pandemic situation while preparing for fundraising? Is there any budget for this at an organisational level, the recognition about how hard it can be mentally, constantly working on proposals there? Question for you.
As a team, we're trying to be to keep that at the forefront of our minds for every single person working at Integrity Action. So people who focus on fundraising are no exception. And to be honest, as raising funds is stressful, operations are equally stressful, working in finance is equally stressful, and etc. I think it's just the way of working that you need to think about, and then equally distribute that support across the team. I think how to maintain mental health, all of us, is a massive question these days. I think we're all equally sharing that burden, and one thing that has worked quite well for us at Integrity Action is to be very open with each other as we start our team meetings by saying how we all individually are before jumping into, and this is what I need to battle this week, and I need that kind of help, and then just trying to be as supportive as we can. But it's excellent question. I think it's not going to be till the end of this incredibly stressful period of our professional lives that we will be able to reflect and fully understand the impact that it has on our teams and on all of us individually.
Thank you, Yasmina. And we do have a session on kind of supporting organisations in mental health, and I'm just going to double check what day it is. So if people are keen to find out more, you can attend that session. So I'll come to you at the end with that. Rowena, there's a question for you. What were the specific benefits of EPF that encouraged you to merge with them?
I think primarily it was alignment of the mission. So they were working on poverty alleviation in sub-Saharan Africa, and so are we. So there was absolutely alignment with the mission, and I think very early on we could see the benefits that a merger could bring. I'm an accountant, so I was looking at their books, and I didn't see how they could survive financially more than sort of 18 months. And I didn't want the organisation to fold. We thought that we could really bring mutual benefits, and yeah, so I think it was alignment of the missions was the main thing, and then it was obviously trying to secure a future for an incredibly worthwhile organisation.
Great. I've just been informed that the session on wellbeing and mental health is on Thursday. So if you're interested in finding out more, please make sure to sign up to that one, as I know that's important for everyone in these uncertain times. We're coming to the end of the session now. So if you've got any more questions, please drop them into the chat box. Oh, another one's just come in. How did you communicate your change processes? So this is for both of you, to your existing donors, and any top tips. So first, Yasmina, let's go to you, and Marina will ask you that question secondly.
By being very open and honest about what we know and what we didn't know. That's pretty much how we work with all of our funders. Doesn't matter how hard the conversation is. My personal view is the harder the times are, the more you need to communicate, and as clearly and timely and honestly and openly as you can.
And the same question for you, Rowena.
Yeah, I think gradually. It was something that we did over time. So we would communicating to donors, we would do it kind of separately under the separate brands for quite some time, and then we started to do some joint communication. But I think the key definitely there was very gradually and just keep listening to what people are saying. But we didn't have a kind of big bang sort of approach. That wouldn't have been right for the donors. Also think about the donors and think about what they might need. Their needs would be quite different depending on the type of donor that we had. So with a lot of the individual givers who'd been supporting EPF for a long time, it was definitely a gradual process. Yeah.
We're coming to the end. I'm just going to ask if either of you have any closing comments that you'd like to make. So we'll start with you, Yasmina.
I would say that sometimes it feels like the only rational thing to do in crazy times like current ones is to produce bids, bid, and chase funders and just do it. The volume will eventually work out and things will be fine. I think go against that intuition, build solid plans that will preserve resources internally, that will safeguard the sanity of your people, pick and choose what you're going to pursue, and be very, very mindful of unique added value that your organization provides, both to people that you serve, to partners that you work with, and with funders. Processes are much easier to set up. This particular process has worked for us. It's fairly simple, fairly straightforward, but for the organization of our type, hopefully time will show that it was the right one. But yeah, I would say let the desire to achieve impact lead all your decision making, and it's better to achieve limited impact but achieve the depth of it than to spread yourself too wide and then find yourselves in a couple of years' time that you're neither here or there, that you have lost the essence of that unique value that you bring.
Thanks, Yasmina. Really interesting to hear about that, and thinking more strategically and putting kind of impact at the centre rather than having a scattergun approach to kind of proposals. Rowena, any last thoughts from you?
Yeah, I completely agree with what Yasmina said. I think that's really interesting, and don't try and do everything. And I think I would only add actually that be open to change, be open to adapting and changing, and it can be a really, really positive experience.
Okay, well, I think both of you have talked about change and it being a positive experience, and I think that if that's one thing that we can take away from this session, I think that's really important. I'm sure that theme will come up kind of time and time again today and over the rest of the sessions that we're going to be having this week. The next, thank you both of you, Yasmina and Rowena, for starting off the day. Great first session for the fun day and for the whole conference. So thank you very much for taking part.